My friends, join me for nearly an hour of the deepest speedrunning and gaming history, lore, and odd tales, just the thing for you to get comfy and relax or sleep to. And we'll start with the story of this remarkable VHS tape that few have ever heard about or seen, but is extremely significant to the history of speedrunning, as we'll find out.
Here we go!
Here's a story I stumbled upon which is truly remarkable. It starts with this, a video where the thumbnail is a VHS tape, common practice among speed gamers years ago, recording your gameplay onto a VCR, playing for 2 hours, rewinding, recording again, over and over and over, until you got a great record that you were happy with and was worth going through the process of mailing the tape to someone who could capture it with the niche and uncommon technology of the time. This tape says Beetle Adventure Racing, along with another couple of words, which we'll get to later. The next frame shows what appears to be a forum post on Twin Galaxies for March 2004. Kirby SSB, Mount Mayhem, 4 minutes, 46 seconds, 44 centiseconds. I'm completely new here and I've been playing Beetle Adventure Racing since it came out, and I finally decided to compete in it. Mount Mayhem was always my favorite level, and after a long time I got that time. I have no proof of this as of yet, but I have the equipment to put a video online. The only problem is my N64 don't hook up to my VCR very well. I expect I can get a video pretty soon. Edit. Okay, it's on tape now. I might want to perfect it a bit more and more and put it online. Edit 2, it's on my computer now. Edit 3, okay, forget the old record, I just got Mount Mayhem 442.18. On tape, not on my computer. But the video we see is indeed of that run, 442.18, and the updated description uploaded in November 2020, 16 years after this run was performed, reads this. OMG, amazing to find this tape. This run was performed around March 6, 2004. I actually made a copy of this tape and shipped it to Robert Maruchek of Twin Galaxies to get it verified. This was the first gaming record I truly cared about. I believe this time stood for 4 years or so before being beaten. I came up with the big cave wall hit strategy when working on this run, still a relevant strategy, but the route remains quite different compared with today. The track record as of this upload more than 16 years later is 429.89 by yours truly. And so we see the run is of a stage called Mount Mayhem in the game Beetle Adventure Racing by a player Kirby SSB. But my friends, who is Kirby SSB? That's something we'll get into in a few moments, but first let's talk about Beetle Adventure Racing. So Beetle Adventure Racing was a game released on the Nintendo 64 in 1999, and it was originally developed as a Need for Speed entry for the console, since Electronic Arts, or EA, was the publisher, and they of course are the publishers still to this day of the Need for Speed series of games. However, at some point, EA signed a deal with Volkswagen, who were trying to promote their new Beetle, which had just launched the year before to the North American market. So the game turned into Beetle Adventure Racing, and was basically a promotional vehicle for the vehicle. But EA worked on the game with Paradigm Simulation, who also worked on Pilot Wings 64. So the maps all have similar kind of interactable structures, so just a general vibe all around. After all, the title is Beetle Adventure Racing, and so it encourages you to adventure around to find various shortcuts and other cool things laid throughout the tracks of the game. Crazily, the new Beetle did not enter the Australian market, so the whole game was repatched in Australia as HSV Adventure Racing, with HSV standing for Holden Special Vehicles, those being a General Motors brand of vehicles local to the Australian market, which is just such a crazy thing to ponder if one likes to ponder such things. Like, imagine two kids with similar upbringings both playing this game, one Australian, one American or Canadian, and they all have these similar memories, but the car they drove in the game is slightly different. Man, it's something to think about. Anyways, the game has 6 tracks and only has one vehicle, the Volkswagen Beetle, or Holden. It comes in various designs and stats and loadouts, speed, acceleration, handling, but just one vehicle. And if there is a main criticism of the game, it's that it does lack choice in these departments. But the tracks are really epic, and Mount Mayhem is certainly one of those cool tracks. Overall, it was a pretty cool game. Not quite an N64 classic of the era, but pardon the cliche, in kind of a hidden gem. Apparently it sold around 320,000 copies, which is decent, but over 50 N64 games sold 1 million. So this is not even like 5% of what the top N64 games of that era sold, like GoldenEye or Super Mario 64. Yet the speedrun we've been watching and discussing is perhaps one of the most significant deep cuts of speedrunning lore, as we will soon find out. Because who was Kirby SSB? Well, this is a person who would later go by numerous other names. But if we look closely at that VHS tape, we can find one such of those names, Cosmo Wright. And I know that usage of that name can be sensitive for some, but I will respectfully use it in this historical context, especially since this video itself was uploaded to the Narcissa channel with the Cosmo name clearly visible in the thumbnail, showing continuity between names, which is important here. We'll get into that a little more later. This run is no longer the world record. There have been new strategies and new techniques with the game's various adventure paths that are faster to play out. Especially modern techniques involving jumping off the track at points, passing certain checkpoints on the track, and then using the L button, which is sort of the panic or recovery button, to be placed back somewhere along the track at a further point ahead. But this was Cosmo's first real speedrun submission of any kind to anywhere of significance. And yes, we can joke about Twin Galaxies and the reverence they do or do not deserve, but back in this era, they were one of the most highly regarded speedrunning submission platforms, for whatever that was worth. And if you know anything about speedrunning, you would know that Cosmo would go on to be one of the most influential people in the entirety of the community. For example, being a co-founder of the website Speedruns Live, which was one of the first highly active community hubs in all of speedrunning, especially during the beginnings of the Twitch era, and this was truly instrumental in the growth and interest of speedrunning as a gaming style. Of course, as well, Cosmo had remarkable Zelda speedruns at the early Games Done Quick events, especially in 2012 and 13, where the performances were highly anticipated and held in great regard with wonderful explanations of the game. And this influence would carry on for many years, culminating in Ocarina of Time Any% 1810, one of the most remarkable world records ever set in the history of speedrunning. Honestly, the story of Cosmo into Narcissa has been told to death on YouTube. Fewer people these days know about the latest reinvention, Nova, where we see live streams of games like Tekken being played on a regular basis. However, this basic speedrun and former world record of Beetle Adventure Racing's Mountain Mayhem, submitted by Kirby SSB to Twin Galaxies back in 2004 and uploaded to YouTube as Narcissa in 2020, is just such a great time capsule to a different era and such an innocent time, as the first substantial speedrun ever submitted by someone who would go on to influence the space truly, deeply, in a way that no other ever has since. When you hear the name Wouter Jansen, you may think of GoldenEye speedrun legend Wouter Jansen, who set more records in the game than anyone else, and who defined the early era of the game's history, being champion of the game from 2001 to 2003. But what if I told you there's another Wouter Jansen? Not just another guy named Wouter Jansen, which is roughly the Dutch equivalent of Walter Johnson, but another prominent speed gamer named Wouter Jansen. Indeed, Wouter M. Jansen is one of the most prominent F-Zero-X speed gamers in the game's history, having set over 100 world records on the time trial stages there, dating back to 2004, and still holding the records on the tracks Mute City and Rainbow Road, in both full course and fast lap. Even more impressive is that Wouter M. Jansen, or WMJ for short, well, his Mute City records were performed in 2022, and his Rainbow Road records performed in 2025, showing incredible longevity to remain at the top of a prominent game's leaderboards and at the forefront of record setting for a period of well over 20 years. Honestly, that is truly remarkable in itself. But in this segment today, I won't be talking about WMJ's remarkable F-Zero-X world records. Rather, I wanted to discuss another set of his remarkable records, which has sparked a ridiculous and unexpected rivalry with another gamer in a relatively obscure Mario Party side minigame, the Bumper Ball Maze. You see, when you complete Mario Party 1's minigame island and defeat Toad in a slot car derby showdown at the end, you complete the minigame island and are rewarded with the Bumper Ball Maze. Once you complete all the games on the island, you don't need to beat them all to win the island for the first time, but once you complete them all, you get Bumper Ball Maze 2. And then once you set a time in both courses, you get Bumper Ball Maze 3. Naturally, as these are timed challenge runs through a very tight and challenging maze-type course with record times that save into your cartridge, well, the world has seen it serve as the stage for some speed gaming competition over the years. You see, until recently, the records in Bumper Ball Maze were all held by another gamer, Conman22, who had a time, for example, on Bumper Ball Maze 1 of 25.80, setting this record in August 2020, at a time in human history when many records fell in older games due to people having an unprecedented amount of free time on their hands. Connor writes in the description, "Really good, might come back to this time if it gets beaten." Conman22 also tied the record on Bumper Ball Maze 2, a time of 23.73, with a fellow named Silver Boxer. And this course plays a little shorter due to more bridges and shortcuts plays throughout the course, which are tricky to navigate but save time nonetheless. It is, after all, quite easy to fall off the course at any given time, which is the main challenge of these niche and obscure single-player side minigames. All you have to do to control your character is use the control stick, and the entire point of the race or course is to go as fast as you can without falling off, cutting edges, rolling the dice, going as fast as you can towards the end, but as you'll find out if you play it yourself, it's very, very easy to fall off. Bumper Ball Maze 3, the most complicated course, was the biggest challenge for Conman22, who took many years of play to finally beat the previous record of 28.73 held by Silver Boxer since 2015. Finally, in 2024, Conman was able to do so, lowering this all the way to 28.46, a huge cut on an insane run, showing how much optimization is still left in these courses, despite having been playable for over 25 years. So, fair enough, but where does the iconic Wouter M. Jansen come into it? Well, right now. In July 2025, for some reason, Wouter decided to grind the Bumper Ball Mazes, going for all of the world records. And given his natural gameplay mastery and his history of being a truly legendary speed gamer, he would indeed succeed, lowering all three of the niche Bumper Ball Maze records, Bumper Ball Maze 1 to a time of 25.60, cutting 0.2 seconds or roughly 7 frames, cutting Bumper Ball Maze 2 to 23.70, a single frame down, and Bumper Ball Maze 3 to 28.26, a remarkable 6 frames cut. Again, the game simply plays by moving the control stick in the direction of your ball, so it entirely comes down to how ballsy you are, pun intended, with edging the corners of this finicky maze. And so it should surprise no one that Wouter M. Jansen, with his legacy of insane F-Zero X runs, could also be good at the Bumper Ball Maze. But why, exactly? Well, that's just the passion of the game. A man and his speed game, as the old adage goes. We even see some comments on these runs. Crazy Game Nerd, another legendary F-Zero player in his own right, writes, "Going at F-Zero speed right here." And on the third Bumper Ball Maze video, a commenter, Morton Goldthwaite, writes, "I'm always fascinated by the enduring obsession with Nintendo 64. In a world with Subnautica, Doom Eternal, and Tears of the Kingdom, something about N64 games lives rent-free in our heads. We still cherish them." And it's just so true. It's so crazy to ponder, what still compels us, men in now our 30s and 40s, to still, when we find a moment ourselves, to push these games we grew up with to their absolute limits. An everlasting passion to go faster and faster, as instinctive as breathing or walking to many. Speaking of that passion, Conman was not one to take his records being taken lying down. He quickly picked up his controller and took back the records on the mazes number 1 and 2, lowering both by a single frame, where the records remain today. However, he has been unable to match Wouter's incredible time on Bumper Ball Maze 3, a record that still stands to this very day. I searched for tool-assisted runs of these minigames, but could only find things from over a decade ago, runs slower than the records of Wouter and Conman. After all, the game is simply moving the control stick, edging as close to falling off as possible without splashing into the water below. Whatever the case may be, and however much lower these records could theoretically go, they are yet another reminder of how even the most niche corners of these classic video games can serve as the platform for an insane speed gaming rivalry to unfold.
New record!
Mickey's Speedway USA. Now for a bit of bizarre ongoing history in a lesser traveled Nintendo 64 game, Mickey's Speedway USA. Of course, this is a racing game and a pretty late era rare Nintendo 64 kart racer where you play as classic Disney characters on courses based around the United States of America. Naturally, as it is a pretty decent racing game on the N64, there has been some competition over the years in which players have set records and grinded to lower and lower their times. But given that Mickey Speedway is still a little bit of a lesser played, lesser traveled game, it's one of those games that could be absolutely dominated by one player. And that is indeed what has happened throughout most of the game's history. A fellow by the name of Perfect Taste is a player of N64 video games, having dabbled in things like Wave Race and GoldenEye. In fact, this fellow was actually the person who tied my very own first GoldenEye Untied World Record, surfaced to Agent 51, where he matched the score on the stage with an epic mind throw about 10 months after I had originally set it back in January 2006. So Perfect Taste and I have crossed paths on the virtual 64-bit battlefields of days gone by. And yes, I have been pronouncing that correctly in Perfect Taste, not to be confused with Perfect Ace. I believe in this case, Perfect Taste is an aficionado of things like coffee and cigars, thus guiding him to pick such a name, Perfect Taste. Well, Perfect Taste's best game, the one where he dominated and wrote the most history, was indeed Mickey's Speedway USA, where he set and held every single record on all of the game's 21 courses, both fast lap and 3-lap, for 42 total records. And this is something he would do numerous times through the early 2010s into the 2020s. And anytime a player would come along to challenge him, Perfect Taste would manage to get every world record back, through his masterful use of Ludwig von Drake, the game's best character, who you unlock by beating the final trophy race on the hardest difficulty. Watching Perfect Taste's runs in this game is a glimpse into the niche mastery that so remarkably takes place in speedrunning. Again, a man and his speed game, lowering times, edging corners, and improving runs beyond what even the developers would probably ever hope for or imagine. Fighting to see a lower and lower time save into your game file as you cross the finish line. But nothing lasts forever. In recent months, a fellow by the name of Lil Tent has not only threatened Perfect Taste's records, but dominated them almost completely, lowering every single 3-lap record and most of the 1-lap times as well. But here's the thing, and what I see as a minor controversy in the fascinating world of Mickey's Speedway USA time trialing. While all of Perfect Taste's records were performed on an original Nintendo 64 console with an original N64 controller, cartridge, and hardware, the runs of Lil Tent are done on emulator. Now, it's pretty well established that the N64 emulators are not exactly entirely accurate to the console due to various lag anomalies and other imperfections, and thus most speed games forbid use of emulator when seriously competing, or at least section them off on a separate leaderboard. And this is not to say that Lil Tent is cheating or anything of the like. In fact, this is all probably owing to Mickey's Speedway being a smaller speed game with fewer people playing and administering the game than something like a Super Mario 64 or GoldenEye. In a world where thousands of people were playing Mickey's Speedway, I'm sure there would be separate leaderboards for emulator versus original console. And what's crazier is that, while Lil Tent has achieved all 21 of the game's 3-lap records, there is one stage where Perfect Taste is actually in 3rd, having been beaten by yet another player. Los Angeles 3-lap, where Mega Toner has taken 2nd place behind Lil Tent. Now here's the thing, Megatoner has also played on emulator. It's nearly impossible to figure out exactly how much time emulator saves, if any, over original Nintendo 64 hardware. On the majority of courses, Lil Tent is only a few tenths of a second ahead of Perfect Taste, which isn't unexpected given how these games tend to progress. But the ultimate question is, are his records better due to superior playing, handling, and driving, or are they better due to being played on superior hardware? And while this may be something that the Mickey's Speedway players sort out at some point, it's equally possible that, given the small pool of competitors and administrators in the game, that the leaderboards remain in this state, allowing emulator and console runs blended together for the rest of eternity, for better or worse. And again, I don't want to take away anything from Lil Tent and Megatoner. I'm sure these emulator runs are great, and maybe there's no difference at all in this game, but it certainly is a question that came to my mind when browsing through the leaderboard of Mickey's Speedway USA. Like, are they all on an even playing field? Is this truly fair? What exactly can be done? And in a small game like this, sometimes the answer really is nothing can be done. An unmatched record for 6 years. Perfect Dark's G5 stage has long been the set where the game's greatest players have dueled it out for increasingly insane, precise, and masterful records. The level requires a high degree of skill, as 2 rooms to start the stage require eliminating a number of cloaked guards, invisible guards, where the last guard will have the keycard which unlocks the next door. This means that players who have very consistent movement skill are the ones who can most consistently perform the rapid and tight movements, which allow for getting the most runs deep into the level, from where they can continue to clutch out the runs and set records. Throughout history, players like Carl Jobst, Big Boss Man, Perfect Ace, and True Faith Clemens are the ones who have been most capable of setting world records on this remarkable stage, as well as another fella, Swiss, a good friend of Ace and a sort of specialist on the stage. In more recent times, it has been Perfect Ace who has dominated the G5 stage, holding one of his 2 current untied sweeps here, the other being on Villa. Particularly notable as he is no longer the champion of the game, having been passed by Thunder Fury in the past couple of years, beating him on most other levels. Yet some of Ace's records still remain truly remarkable and close to untouchable, as we will soon find out. On G5 Special Agent, Ace lowered the record 6 consecutive times from 44 to 39 seconds, cutting 1 second each time. The latter few times, his scores were tied by True Faith and Swiss, inspiring Ace to keep taking it a bit further, tighter movements, more aggressive lines, pushing the stage to the absolute limit. In 2016, True Faith sniped Ace by setting an untied of his own, 38 seconds, and this remained untied for about 2.5 years before Ace finally tied the time again and rejoined the fray. But then of course, in spring 2020, everyone was re-inspired to play video games once again. After 22 duplications of 38 seconds, and what Ace describes as probably the best Perfect Dark run I've ever done, he managed to achieve the time of 37 seconds, what may have been Ace's pièce de résistance in a long and storied Perfect Dark career. But then something unexpected happened. A new strategy was discovered where, instead of doing the second main room in the traditional way, that is eliminating the 4 cloaked guards as quickly and efficiently as possible, we instead lure a guard to open the locked door through a series of very specific, well-timed shots through the glass window, allowing him to recover in such a way that lures him to open the locked door, something that is not intended and is usually not possible. But this indeed saved time and sparked new interest in the stage. Now, it only saved about a second, if even that, but it was enough to inspire Ace to keep going further and push his newly crowned crown jewel yet another second lower, to 36, a time he achieved on May 2nd, 2020. Ace wrote of the run, "Barely managed to eke this one out. Insane run." This time remains untied, nearly 6 years later. No one has been able to match it. Only Swiss has come within 1 second, achieving a 37 of his own in late 2021. True Faith has a 38, which he set in 2016, and everyone else is at 39 or slower, and that includes the game's current champion, Thunder Fury. This is all to say that Ace's G5 Special Agent 36 is currently the game's longest standing untied world record. In a game that saw tons of activity since that year 2020, this is the one which has remained unmatched to this very day. A few of Ace's other records are climbing up there, but G536, a time achieved with the help of a new strategy on his already crown jewel achievement of a run, sits beautifully atop the list of the game's untied world records. Will anyone ever tie it, or is it simply too good? Given True Faith achieved 38 back in 2016 with older strategies, it would make sense that he might be the favorite to achieve this tie, if he ever cared to play for it. True Faith hasn't set a new personal best in Perfect Dark since 2023, preferring to play GoldenEye and do other things in life instead. But that one time that True Faith did improve back in 2023 was the G5 stage on another difficulty, Perfect Agent. So perhaps the spark to pick up the controller and slay one of Ace's masterpieces may still be there. Another notable piece is that Ace also holds the longest standing untitled record in GoldenEye 007, Facility Agent 42, a time he set back in July 2019. As the games get older and older, the records more and more refined, might we be unknowingly well into this era where two of Ace's records, achieved in 2019 and 2020, might just last forever untied with no one able to match them? Truly, with such a thought, I can only ponder deep into the night. I just want to take a moment here to thank the channel members and Patreon supporters for all of your support of this work. If you're enjoying thus far, please do give the video a like, keep watching, stay true, and thanks. The next story is about a speedrunner by the name of DDM6, who, for one reason or another, left a very unusual mark on the community. DDM6 began playing GoldenEye and Perfect Dark in December 2020, dipping his toes into the games, getting some very beginner tier times. Records that didn't require video evidence at all. The first video he would get around to posting would be in February 2021, for the score Duel Agent 3 seconds. Now the duel isn't even worth points on the Perfect Dark world rankings. It's not really considered a level in the game, rather just a bonus training exercise. But he wanted to at least take a video of the end screen to prove he was able to score the maxed record on the level, tied with hundreds of other players. And not just to prove the time, but this kind of first video that one puts out can often come from a desire to prove your own existence in a way, prove that you're a real person in the increasingly digital, metaversial world. Now, there's nothing inherently strange or unusual about this video. It's just an up-close clip of his screen. Sure, it's captured by a webcam rather than a direct capture, but for beginner times that's usually considered perfectly acceptable. So no one imagined that his future videos would become among the most strange and unusual in the history of speedrunning. No one could predict what videos were to come. In April 2021, DDM6 was playing GoldenEye's Runway Agent stage, attempting to get a time of 23 seconds, once a standard score in the game. Even though hundreds of players have now achieved 22 seconds on the stage, and even the record's now 21 seconds, getting a 23 here is still a nice stepping stone on your way to improving your speedruns and really digging your teeth into the game. So naturally, DDM6 wanted to live stream his attempts to prove he scored such a time. However, unbelievably, this is what his streams looked like. Yes, this is not a joke. This is the actual Twitch highlight of DDM6's Runway Agent 23 seconds. It seems as though he forgot to change the scene in his live stream broadcaster. So with this layout, his computer background is the main thing displayed. You know, this would make sense for your webcam to show your face in the corner and the big PC gameplay in the background, you know, if you were playing a PC game. So really it seems like he just set this to the wrong layout. which is pretty hilarious. Again, if this were a world record speedrun, this would be considered a massive mishap and probably would not pass proof call. But because it's just a beginner time, a time hundreds of people have achieved and hundreds more have beat, it's not all that big of a deal, and it ends up just being a funny and epic moment in GoldenEye history, and a silly thing to reference in the years to come. If you listen closely to DDM6's reaction to getting this time, it even sounds like he's trying to communicate from an underwater submarine or something. However, this 23 still didn't offer too much insight into the playing conditions of DDM6 since, well, the gameplay is so incredibly tiny. What would offer insight into the remarkably strange world of DDM6 were his upcoming videos and live streams, especially playing the stage Bunker 1. Here's a clip of one of these streams. If you look to the left when the screen lights up the room, it might not look too off at a first glance, but many did point out, is he playing from a bathroom? The full wall mirror leading down to a counter with an electric outlet and white electrical cords are all common among what you'd expect to find in a bathroom. Many began speculating on just what was going on here or what circumstances led this man to speedrun from his bathroom, if that's indeed where he was playing from. But we wouldn't have to wait too long to find out. On May 6th, DDM6 made a thread on the Elite Forum asking about something strange he saw in his gameplay of GoldenEye 007. I almost just had a heart attack. Craziest thing I ever saw in GE. In the thread, he describes turning on his console for a session of gameplay and then experiencing all the guards folding in on themselves and having some sort of spasm, twitching, stroke, aneurysm, whatever. Now, to the inexperienced eye, in fairness, this does seem extremely strange, but the mundane reality is that this is simply what happens in GoldenEye with a crooked cartridge, something that's been long known and experienced by really anyone who has spent a decent amount of time playing the game. As top 5 GoldenEye speedrunner Irie Butler writes, "Playing with a tilted cartridge can break your game. I wouldn't mess around." This footage here was captured by top 15 GoldenEye player JD Black, who risked his own cartridge to get the footage, and shows exactly what would have happened to DDM6 in this situation. So it's pretty epic. I'd say the footage was worth it, but yeah, do not try this at home. More importantly, this epic thread served as an opportunity to discuss DDM6's strange gaming studio. DDM6 himself offered this information that many had suspected for a while. I guess it was tilted, but I couldn't tell. I take the N64 in and out of the bathroom every time I play. I play at night while the wife is sleeping, and this is the furthest room from our bed, so yes, I play GoldenEye in the bathroom. I suppose these movements every day slightly tilted it somehow over many times moving it. This revelation was amazing. Stunning, but amazing, and actually quite considerate, all things considered. The thread then received a couple of great one-liners. "Have you been getting any times, mate? Perhaps playing in the bathroom is making you washed up." Naturally, I took the opportunity to ask DDM6 directly if he brings in a chair or, well, he sits on the throne. He did respond that he brings in a chair, though the throne would give him a more direct line of sight, so that's pretty funny and epic, and that's what it was, all in good fun. A very silly situation that was taken in good light. On May 14, 2021, DDM6 actually did get the Bunker 1 agent time he was looking for, a time of 18 seconds. Similarly to Runway 23, this is another time that was once a world record back in the early 2000s, then became a sort of standard where only a few people had lower, but it's since been beaten by hundreds of players. But again, it is a good stepping stone as you go on to improve your overall gameplay and gain more experience in the game. His stream reads, Bunker 1 hell until 18 live from the toilet, only streaming for proof, not worth watching, can rarely see chat anyways, don't waste your time watching. I mean, by the sounds of it, you'd think this would be the worst stream ever, instead of, one of the most fascinating and amazing streams ever performed. He goes on to say, Bunker 1 Agent 18, trashiest warp ever, didn't think it stood a chance. I believe I've done way better and feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone or something. Oh baby, don't we all feel that way? It's easy to see why this fellow became the subject of such intrigue and discussion within the community. But really, with a faster warp, this probably could have been a time of 17 seconds, a pretty decent time worth over 90 points on the rankings. I wonder how he would have reacted to that. I suppose we'll never know. Many of DDM6's videos feature quite a notable ending. There's a technique one can perform, sort of considered going above and beyond improving your time, where you can show the actual console on camera, pressing reset, perhaps even moving and replacing the audio-video cables in the television, demonstrating the game input reacts when you remove or replace the cables. And while this isn't mandated for records yet, not even insane untitled records, some runners do like to do this whole song and dance just to really prove their runs are not spliced, and that the game is reacting as it should to your inputs. For one reason or another, DDM6 decided to perform this verification method on his Bunker 1 Agent 18, again something completely unnecessary given the non-notableness of the time. But this amazing decision gave us more insight into his strange and unusual gaming setup. In this frame, as he's removing the AV cables from the back of the N64, you can clearly see the console placed precariously on the bathroom sink with miscellaneous cosmetics strewn about, so he wasn't lying. The television looks even more precarious, with about 30% of it hanging off the bathroom counter, ready to topple over at any misstep. The controller cable is able to just barely run under the faucet itself. It's also truly remarkable and a testament to the lengths some folks are willing to go to get in a few good hours of speedrunning. DDM6 would perform this above and beyond verification method on pretty much every personal record from here on out. This one in particular is amazing. Frigate 00 Agent 211. It's a 379th ranked time. Nearly 400 people have played speedran this level faster than DDM6 here. Even so, he once again performs the whole extra proof step at the end. Now, I don't want to de-anonymize the fellow, that's certainly not my goal here, and I don't think this is really that. You cannot see any defining characteristics in this frame, plus this highlight is publicly visible on his Twitch channel. But you can see that this whole time, DDM6 was toting around his entire laptop, using the built-in laptop webcam to record the footage of his gameplay, as well as the extra footage behind the television. It just brings the thing to a whole new level, picking up the whole laptop and showing behind the TV for each and every personal record, and really just adds yet another level of surrealism to the whole situation. It's just amazing to sit back and take in the speedrunning career of DDM6, the man who speedran from his bathroom for positive and considerate reasons at that. To see the faucet right here, ready to spray his N64 at any moment of absent-mindedness or inadvertence, his precarious television and console, bringing in a chair and laptop. It's just wonderful in the way that only the strange and unusual characters who brighten up the world of speedrunning can be. The next few stories are about some significant lost media in speedrunning, runs that were world records or close to it, but for one reason or another have been lost to time and technology. Now, one can hardly make a speedrunning lost media video without a mention of True Faith, the legendary GoldenEye and Perfect Arc speedrunner who, while he's become much better at archiving his speedruns these days, does unfortunately have numerous instances of lost media throughout the ages. One of the most fascinating and bizarre pieces of True Faith's lost media revolves around the stage Rescue Special Agent in Perfect Dark. In March 2017, the record on the stage stood at 2:16. However, a new strategy was discovered where you lure a scientist out from a room to a place closer on your path later on in the run, so you can acquire his keycard and complete the mission without having to go all the way down this long room, into this other room, and all the way back. This could save anywhere between 5 and 10 seconds depending on how well it was done and how lucky you got with the scientist's location. And so Big Boss Man would use this strategy to lower the record to 2:14 and then 2:13 by March 13th. However, only days later, True Faith would achieve a 2:12. He would upload this video, which remains visible to this day, so it isn't quite our lost media. However, the run was not without issue. At this point in time, proof standards had been raised as technology improved and had become more widespread, and unfortunately, this run has a number of moments where the footage slowed down or dropped frames completely. This was due to True Faith's laptop getting quite old and past its due, its processor no longer being able to keep up with the taxing task of recording speedruns, and as a result, the world record was immediately rejected from the rankings. This didn't deter True Faith too much, however, who kept playing for his own sake and satisfaction, despite knowing that any subsequent records would be unlikely to count on the rankings, given his laptop was incapable of capturing acceptable proof videos. A few days later, True Faith was on a very good speedrun of the stage with an even faster scientist lure. He began to get nervous as the run progressed, especially after he got the really good and quite rare scientist lure. And so he made the remarkable decision at a pause towards the end of the stage to stop the recording halfway through the run. The idea behind this was to help him become less nervous and clutch out the run. He knew the run wasn't going to count on the rankings anyways, and so he thought if it wasn't recording, he would be even less nervous in pulling out the run for his own satisfaction. And clutch out the run he did, achieving a new record of 2:11, a would-be 2-second untied world record on the stage. Alas, only half the run was recorded, and the quality of that half of the run would have dropped frames and not met proof standards, even if it were recorded in full. The first half of True Faith's Rescue Special Agent 211 was never uploaded in any way, as he just never saw the point in doing so, and it's unlikely to ever be uploaded. True Faith would soon after discard his old laptop in exchange for a newer one, more capable of recording gameplay footage that meets contemporary proof standards. His more recent records were indeed recorded on this new laptop, so that much is for the best. But suffice to say, the old laptop is probably somewhere in a landfill now, perhaps somewhere in the great American Midwest, or perhaps shipped off as electronic waste to a recycling facility somewhere across the seas. Either way, the first half of True Faith's purported Rescue Special Agent 211 is all but guaranteed to be lost media forever and will never be recovered, lest someone stumbles across his hard drive in an old landfill somewhere. But if sifting through old landfills to find hard drives is your hobby, I imagine there are better things to look for, like old Bitcoin wallets, or the plentiful raw materials like copper, gold, and silver that are sometimes used in electronic devices. Alas, such is the story of this remarkable, noteworthy, and strange speedrun. One of the most influential earlier Super Mario 64 speedrunners whose speedrun media has become mostly lost was a young man named Alex Tolio. Alex Tolio, who also went by Alex SM64 at the time, was a Greek speedrunner who played in the 2013-14 era, picking up the game after breaking his neck one summer and having to spend that summer indoors in a neck brace while recovering with very limited mobility. Speedrunning is really the perfect activity for such times. There aren't really too many Greek speedrunners, especially not back then, so our pal Alex Tolio was quite a rare young man indeed. Now, one can imagine being around 17 or 18 years old at the time and nursing a broken neck, Tolio wasn't exactly in the state to be physically out and about, collecting the items he might need to speedrun, so he made do with what he had. This meant he was speedrunning Super Mario 64 on the Wii Virtual Console, rather than the original N64. Now, this all took place at a strange time in speedrunning history, particularly the Super Mario 64 speedrunning community. You see, this era saw the massive growth of speedrunning as a whole thanks to the advent of live streaming on Twitch and prominent speedrun marathons, and Super Mario 64 was at the forefront of this massive growth. However, the speedrunning community was quite disorganized at the time, with no real, easily accessible leaderboard to display the world record times, or website displaying rules governing the various communities. Speedrun.com hadn't quite been invented yet, MarioRuns.com may have been around, but it wasn't that widely known or used yet, and so the Mario 64 speedrunners, and more importantly in this case, the casual Mario 64 stream viewers, weren't always super tuned into the ongoings and regulations among the community. So while Super Mario 64 speedrunning had been around for about a decade by this point, it was still very new to much of the massively growing speedrun audience. This was sometimes an area of contention for the Mario 64 runners, who would get particularly bothered when there was confusion surrounding the world record of the various categories, like 120 star or 70 star. You see, one issue was that it had been organically decided and agreed that the main categories of Super Mario 64 were speedrun on Nintendo 64, as many players around the world had been competing on original N64 for numerous years by this point. However, at this time, with many newcomers keen to get involved themselves with the equipment they had available, there were some players speedrunning on the Virtual Console release of the game on the Nintendo Wii, like our pal Alex Tolio. Now, this isn't inherently wrong or anything, but the Virtual Console does run the game faster, saving time on runs from reduced lag and loading times. And this could be even more confusing for the casual viewer, where they've seen that, for example, the Ocarina of Time speedrun community, the next most popular N64 speed game, did allow Virtual Console openly in their main ranked categories of the game. The Mario runners, on the other hand, did not want to obsolete the previous decade of speedrunning simply by allowing Virtual Console, which is why they just always wanted the N64 runs to be considered the main, most prestigious de jure category. And so the concern from the core Mario 64 community was that the faster times on Virtual Console would somewhat cheapen the records on N64, at least possibly in the eyes of a brand new, casual speedrun viewer. For example, if Virtual Console saves roughly a minute in 70 star, if the 70 star record on Virtual Console ever fell below the 70 star record on N64, it could create a bit of an awkward situation for the casual viewers, and it's not the simplest thing to explain. With more speedrunners playing on Virtual Console, this scenario would become more and more likely. So, amidst Alex Tolio's development as a speedrunner, he was able to get some really good scores in the main categories of SM64 on Virtual Console. Most notably, he scored a time of 49.08 on 70 star, which was 1 second faster than Siglemic's world record on N64 of 49.09 in the same category. Now, of course, this was a great run by Tolio, but it was still a significantly less good run than Siglemic's 49.09, just by virtue of it being played on a faster console. Now, while at first there may have been almost a sense of disgust or unsettledness towards the Virtual Console 49.08 beating the N64 record, I think over time, as speedrunning has become more and more fleshed out, one can certainly appreciate and see the historical significance of such a run in its own right, regardless of what one thinks of the N64 Virtual Console discrepancy. However, believe it or not, this 49.08 by Alex Tolio has become lost media. Now, while it should always be the responsibility of the runner themselves to upload and archive their own runs, it's understood that this doesn't always happen. And nowadays, some historians, archivists, YouTubers, and ranking moderators of the game often take this role instead. However, probably owing to the confusion around the validity or even value of these virtual console runs at the time, this just never happened. No one archived or downloaded the run. It's understandable why this happened, as the community was unsure what to make of virtual console speedruns at the time. But looking back now, we can see that this 4908 was a notable and historic run in at least some regard. However, Tolio himself never archived the run on his Twitch channel or YouTube, nor did any moderator of the game do so either. Tolio's personal records of 4908 in 70 star and 14904 in 120 star have become lost media. His 16 star personal best, also on Virtual Console, comes up as verified on speedrun.com, but once again, the run was never archived and the video has been lost to time. These days, the Virtual Console and even emulator runs of SM64 have their own place on the speedrun.com leaderboards. And while in no case today are these runs faster than the world records on N64, they certainly could be if a top player dedicated a grind into making this happen. There's no reason for that today other than just doing it for the sake of it, of course, and the best players want to compete against the other best players who all play on the original N64. But back in the day, there was this very real fear of the Virtual Console runs being comparably easily faster than the N64 runs, all other things equal, creating a runaway effect that could not be recovered. You know, if one person beat the 120 star on Virtual Console and so did another person and then another person, that just may have become the main way of playing the game. And while personally I do like the way things are now, with N64 being the main way to play SM64, it is interesting to think about the what if Virtual Console did end up becoming the main category, the main console for Super Mario 64 speedrunning. Currently, Tolio's Twitch channel only has 4 videos, all gameplay unrelated to his Super Mario 64 career, and he was last live 5 years ago. His Twitter account appears deleted as well, but if you search for Alex Tolio on Twitter, you'll see plenty of folks who remember the man fondly as a funny and epic member of the speedrun community, and one who pushed the game along, whose speedruns helped modernize and organize the way Super Mario 64 is ranked and competed today. His videos may be lost media, but his legacy is not forgotten by those who are around to see it. April 13th, 2012 was a day that would change speedrunning forever, for it is this day when the Ganondorf strategy was discovered in Ocarina of Time, that being the discovery that one could warp from the Deku Tree to Ganon's castle, defeating Ganon as a child, and making the once Odyssean game beatable in less than half an hour. Up until this point, the fastest way to beat the game was this really wacky strategy involving getting Furore's Wind on the B button and warping from Dodongo's Cavern into the credits. So naturally, speedrunners were thrilled to have a new strategy to play around with and set new records. On that day, many Zelda speedrunners took their primitive streams and hangouts online, which were not as centralized as they are today on Twitch and Discord. Folks were in various places like Skype, IRC chat, streaming on all sorts of now defunct websites. It was a chaotic but happy mess. Incredibly, the very first world record ever set with the Ganondorf strategy is still viewable today, a highlight on the Twitch channel of ZFG, beating the game in what appears to be 35 minutes and 15 seconds. Although back then, runs were timed from reset rather than starting a new file. So this would be a 34:59 by today's standards. In any case, a couple other runs that night would become our lost media. A runner, Choco Pop-Tart, held the record at 28 minutes something seconds, but only for a matter of about 12 minutes. In fact, this YouTube comment from ZFG's follow-up record shares an estimate that Choco Pop-Tart finished his run as ZFG was roughly 13 minutes into his next run, a time that would defeat Choco Pop-Tart with 25:32. However, through the following night, as happens every day, Asia was waking up, and legendary Japanese speedrunner SVA gave the new strategy some attempts. SVA scored a new record of 25:15, streaming the event through Stickam, a now defunct live streaming video chat website. Unfortunately, no one was actively screen recording the run, so it went in one end of the internet tubes and out the other. But many community members witnessed the run and can verify that it actually happened. Amazingly, there have been roughly 140 improvements to the Ocarina of Time any percent world record since, and every single one still has a video out there that exists and is viewable today. An amazing and commendable achievement in archiving and preventing lost media by the Zelda speedrun community. In early 2013, a battle was taking place between three of GoldenEye speedrunning's all-time great players, Perfect Ace, Mark Rutsu, and True Faith. They were all playing for 45 seconds on Egypt Secret and 00 Agent, a level that blends the skill of getting accurate headshots on Baron Samedi from very far away, with the luck of having him pass away quickly thanks to a fast death animation. Ace would win this battle, getting the pair of 45s on January 22nd and 26th, and Mark would tie these only days later on the 29th and 30th. True Faith himself wasn't to be left far behind, as he would notch the 45 on 00 Agent on February 2nd, and the 45 on Secret Agent on February 9th. A classic trifecta showing why they are indeed the legends of the game. However, at the time, True Faith was simply streaming his gameplay to Twitch using a community-shared account. Now, it should always be the responsibility of the speedrunner to archive and back up copies of their speedruns. Alas, this doesn't always happen. In this case, True Faith's 45 00 Agent was indeed downloaded and re-uploaded to YouTube by a helpful fellow gamer. However, for whatever reason, this wasn't the case with his 45 Secret Agent. The run just lingered there as a past broadcast on this unpartnered community channel for about a month. Many people watched the run, including proof moderators who verified its existence and legitimacy. However, after the 14-day period or whatever it was back in 2012, where Twitch purges your past broadcasts, the run was just lost forever. Everyone felt kind of foolish when we had noticed the video footage of the run had simply vanished into the ether, but it was an important lesson to learn that anyone in the community can step up and make sure runs are archived, especially when they're in the limbo of being precariously stored in a past broadcast on a community Twitch channel. While 45 is no longer the world record on the stage, True Faith's run does have the rare distinction of being a second place time ranked on the leaderboards with no video available. Siglemic was, without a doubt, one of the most influential speedrunners of all time. He improved the world records in Super Mario 64, 120, and 70 star numerous times from 2011 to 2014, but many of these speedruns have been lost. In fact, there is a New York Post article from 2013 mentioning Siglemic's speedrunning, at a time when it was completely unheard of for online gaming achievements to get any kind of mainstream media recognition. And in this article, linking to one of his world records, we can see the video has been made private. This is more or less the story of Siglemic's lost media. His runs were often saved as highlights on Siglemic's Twitch channel or uploaded to his YouTube channel, but in recent years he's removed almost all of his online presence and deleted or privated all of these videos. Two of his most significant records, 144.01 and 143.54, are still available online. Hilariously, his 144.01 is archived on a channel which has since become some kind of TikToker's fan page. But many of Siglemic's other runs exist only in small fragments, like stream recordings of the final few minutes, and some don't exist anymore at all, having been fully lost. One particularly memorable live stream from Siglemic, which has been lost, was a 72-hour marathon stream he performed one weekend in late 2012 or early 2013. In this stream, he began by playing Super Mario 64, but eventually moved to other games, including a Majora's Mask any percent race against Narcissa Wright. Siglemic had been a Majora's Mask speedrunner years earlier, but had since forgotten how to do most of the tricks, so the stream was incredibly entertaining. By the end of the marathon stream, Siglemic seemed to be hallucinating from sleep deprivation while completing a 120-star speedrun in roughly 3 or 4 hours. In April 2014, he would perform another marathon stream, this time 24 hours. This stream has also been mostly lost, but 2 key fragments of the stream have survived. About 6 hours into the stream, which had been entirely 120-star attempts to this point, Siglemic achieved the new 120-star record of 143.54, a record he had been going for on and off for over a year, and it would be the last world record he would ever set in that category. He would then follow this up with a rematch of the Majora's Mask race against Narciso Wright. This Majora's Mask race has mostly survived, with YouTube user Armageddon re-uploading the race. The race is missing only the first 13 minutes and is an incredible watch, giving great insight into the speedrun community at that time. However, the rest of the livestream has likely been lost forever. It is completely understandable that some folks do want to leave their online lives behind and remove their presence entirely, so I don't want to belabor the point. But Siglemic's influence on the speedrun community won't soon be forgotten by those who are around to witness it, even though most of his speedrun media has since been lost.